Dorident to everybody. Very grateful and proud to be here with you. It's a really amazing way to end 2 very intense weeks I spent in Kiev. So just to present a bit myself, I'm architect. I'm also doing abnormal stuff. I'm also teacher, but mainly learning young architects to build before they draw using wood. And I'm also involved in community supported agriculture schemes in Paris, organizing food circuits between outside of Paris and groups of people. Our office uses a lot of wood, and we have this motto that wood is more friendly for building. But of course, you don't do wood alone. So first we have an office called COS. We're about 10 people now. We work 4 days a week, which is also showing that architects are taking a bit more care of themselves. We started also a new factory, a small factory in Costeau, because we wanted to see what we could do with leftovers from the wood coming from our construction sites. And also it shows that it's pretty easy to go from the BIM and all the software that we have as architects and transfer it to these cutting machines, which don't cost so much, which are lightweight, that you can transport. And having these sort of pop-up factories is certainly something to be thought for the future. And then we have a non-profit, which is why I was here, called the Cosplay. And our relationship with Ukraine started last year in Bordeaux. There was a big congress on wood construction. And we put together a bunch of 30 architects, carpenters, all in professional schools, coming from Ukraine, from France, and from Japan. And they had this task of imagining very simple solutions that could be easily built, that could improve the situation of displaced people, be it in Ukraine in the present conditions, but it could be also after climate disasters in Japan or in France. So here you have an interesting example because this was a sort of sauna that could be added a bit anywhere and which is, of course, filled with straw. We love wood a lot because it's this material that is living, that is sensible, that wears. And I mean, the older it gets, if you take care of it, the better it gets, the more sensible, the more comfort it brings to the people who live in it. Oh, what is this picture? I don't know. Wood is also something that's interesting. People have a spiritual relationship to wood everywhere in the world. And you have a picture in Africa, they just made the road go around the tree because there was a spirit in the tree. But it also happens in Japan, where they pushed back a building because there was a spirit in this tree that they discovered during the construction site. So there is this very emotional relationship to wood. It's also a great thing because it brings together super traditional know-hows and super technological things. You have this incredible factory in Japan making 5,000 houses a year with operated by maybe just 10 people. And with the same tools, you can reuse medieval techniques of assembling wood without nails or glue or whatever. I hope I'm not going to bore you. I'm going to present a few projects relating to sustainability and also showing how they fit into a bit the larger frame of all the stakeholders. This is something I did because I realized that we've been working for 20 years and we have been completely overwhelmed by a number of laws, codes, and referentials like BREEAM, LEED, and things like that. And when you go into sustainability, at some point, you really have to cope with that as an architect because they are providing guidelines. And in the end, there's also something that is required to get the budget, which can be important. When the first project we did in wood in 2001, as you can see, there was not really much things happening regarding sustainability prescriptions in architecture, be it what is the bottom part, which is really law. I mean, what you have to respect, the upper part being more like references, guidelines that are not mandatory, but that people choose to apply. What's interesting is that you can see that at some point, law has been a bit messy, a bit almost as messier as the upper part, because we have to translate. We have the European law, we have the French law, we have the international law. So there's really all these things are piling up. And what's pretty interesting is that in the last years, in a way, all the advance that have been taken by voluntary things like Living Building Challenge, Passive House, or whatever, in a way, they are beginning to be applied in prescriptive laws. So I'm also going to talk a bit about how it applies in France regarding something that terrible called RE2020, which is the French energy regulation. But it's interesting because it's one of the first time in the world that you do not, on a legal point, regard the environmental impact of buildings just during the construction, but really the life cycle analysis. So all the operational aspects is taken into account, which is pretty tricky, as you will see, to do. Our first building in wood was this pretty nice little house. And when there was this new law, we decided that we were going to fact check all our previous wood buildings to see how did they comply. So this was 20 years before the law arrives, and it doesn't work. It's a nightmare. I mean, you can think a wood house is naturally sustainable. Well, not necessarily, because there are so many aspects in sustainability, ranging from electricity consumption, water treatment, etc., the insulation, all the materials. And in the end, it would probably not be, we would have to redo it totally if we did it now. Thankfully, we gained a bit of, don't know what's happening. Yeah, oops, sorry. We gained a bit of know-how on wood construction and wanted really to raise it to, let's say, not a mass production, but at least to more ambitious programs, and mostly social housing, which is collective housing, which is a super subject, of course, in all European cities. So in 2007, we won a project in the city of Paris. And what's interesting is that it was on the two sides of sustainability, which is first, what do we do with heritage? What do we do on the street with this old Parisian housing, but it is totally uncomfortable, that has no insulation? And so our answer was to put external insulation. We redid a lot of stuff to bring it to standards. And this was a demand of the city of Paris. And I would like to insist on this, that our experience in France is that sustainability improvements come from the cities. They are usually the body that leads, that is able, because it has all the links between stakeholders around, be it builders, voters, developers. They are the ones who are able to really push things on a faster track than bigger institutions like the government. And then, of course, what was interesting by using wood was that we did not have to bring so much impact on the backyard to build this nice housing totally made of wood. Lots of technical issues, but we're really super proud of it. And things improve now. It's with little things that are now in the Parisian building code. These are the three of the red things. We would be able to cope with the building code, national building code, until 2027, which means that we designed in something that had 20 years of advance to national law. And that's something that I think is very important when you speak about sustainability, bio-based and earth materials, is that we are already, I mean, everybody is talking about this objective, the objectives are 2030, 2050. When you go to natural materials, you are already fitting in that frame. So it's really, really important to go there. And one of our projects a few years after was really getting higher. And so this is in Strasbourg. It's 12 levels, totally CLT. There's absolutely no concrete, structural concrete. But then you remember all the adding of laws, regulations, codes, and so on. It was really a super tricky thing to bring that in an area that also has this issue of seismic activity. So this is the construction. And of course, when you innovate, and that's also one of the things with bio-based materials, is that when you want to go to mass production, well, you have to prove that you are fitting into all the building codes. And of course, with wood, because of the three little pigs, there's always this issue of fire. And so we had to make this mock-up of full-scale one and set it into fire to sort of test the possibilities to build so high. And there's also a lot of issues regarding sound. Acoustics is also a very important thing. Concrete is a wonderful thing to block sound between places, certain types of sounds. When you are in more lightweight materials, it can be pretty, you can have pretty much interactions between rooms if you don't treat it correctly. So there's a lot of engineering with these natural and vernacular type of materials to bring them to the expected level of comfort that you find in the codes. The funny thing is that, once again, you find this thing between innovation, super technical CLT, you have to have a big factory to do it, and traditional know-how. No computer was able to calculate how the metal connectors between the CLT panels were going to react in case of an earthquake. So we were stuck in that for maybe 1 year because we could not get the building permit. And then the carpenters said, oh, yeah, usually to do that, we just add this little pink piece of wood. We screw on one side, we screw on the other side. That works. Since this is traditional, since this is considered as a traditional technique, you don't have to make the computer simulation. So innovation comes really with this mixture of tradition and new techniques. And now, wow, a building that was made, that was thought in 2004, 10 years ago, well, it's already complying to the regulation going to till 2030, which means pretty much in advance. And there's one thing that we really regret on this one, and you showed the picture of the building with straw insulation nearby, that goes to 7. We couldn't make it with straw, basically because of the earthquake, because of the weight, the extra weight it would have added. It would have overcomplicated the thing. But if we had been able to bring straw in the insulation or another bio-based material, once again, we would be complying to a regulation of 2030 with this building. I also like to insist that it's not only, of course, all the comfort doesn't only come from the wood. There's also a lot of techniques in sustainability that are becoming more and more important. One of them that we used here is to have geothermal energy to heat the water, but also to cool water going into the floors during the summer to compensate for the high levels that you can have due to climate change. And it works pretty well. And it's the same technique that we used in another project, even bigger now, which was just delivered this year, which is the Olympic Village for the Paris Games. We were part of a huge team. I mean, just for celebrating the fact of winning the competition, there were 100 people that had worked on it. So it's a huge, huge team. And once again, the challenge now was going to more massive production. And also being able to cope not with nice carpenters like we used to do, but with big general contractors from France that are so much used to concrete that they have a difficulty going to sustainability. And there's really a lot of pedagogy to do because they're also the ones who are investing. They're also the ones you need investing in the machines. They have to invest in transforming how the workers work. So there's a lot of responsibility that all people involved in sustainable construction have in bringing them to new practices. In a way, we sort of made, it was pretty tense at some point, but all the buildings that are the lower ones, that are the 2 rows on the right, they are all the wood construction. And here the challenge was that, okay, we have a short schedule. We have a short cost to hold. We have 6 architects who have all the architects' fantasies, but we have to find a way, a building system that will be fit in all the proposals of the architects. And this is also something that you do when you get involved in sustainability, that you get outside of your role. Like we're not anymore architects, we are, let's say, facilitators, moderators between other architects, between builders, between the client who is becoming impatient, between the state, the government of France who wants to have the most sustainable building, Olympic Village. And once again, if you want to prove, if you want to go further, like having different types of materials on the facade, we have to do all these tests of burning, of making mock-ups that will be sprayed with water to prove that they are watertight and there is not anything happening inside. So it's always good when you go to something innovative that sounds pretty cool, that maybe you saw somewhere happening in the world, to have a time to do things to prove it works. I'm going to be a bit faster. So this the construction, there's concrete floors. What's funny is that it's exactly the same building system that we use for making this huge office building near Paris. And this is the end. And one of the intentions was that at the end, you don't know that it's built in wood. It looks just like a Parisian thing that is in the that has been there in the city all the time, and having wood inside. Now, the thing, of course, is that that's super nice. It's beginning to rise, but basically, regarding climate change, we still are not really on the good track. We are still globally on the red track, which is going to super high rise of temperatures. And of course, we use wood, but all know maybe that the third greenhouse gas emitting country in the world is called cement, just after China and the US. And it is used worldwide, and it is an incredible issue because we are facing two tasks worldwide. One is renew what has been built, because there's been so much matter and so much CO2 emitted to build all these things in concrete. And the other one is that there are still a huge pressure to build new things, and this incredible thing that we are building one Paris city a week, one New York a month, and one Tokyo a year, actually. So the needs are incredible, and it's really a challenge to shift from the cement industry to more sustainable ways of building. And this shows it at the scale of France. Also, you are here, and the blue trend is what is going to be built as new until 2050, and then you have renew on the bottom. So basically, this is the same situation in all European countries and in a lot of other countries in the world. We have to shift to what do we do with what exists already. And we also have to take a lot of care of the waste. Even wood, when you say it's sustainable, that's when you were in a factory in the forest in Africa. We realized they were burning one house a day just because there was no market to use all this wood. And we made this study with them to see what were the quantities, and you realize that, okay, it requires a little bit of work, but with something that basically is just burned, you can start developing building materials that could be used more locally. There's a lot of interesting studies also made in the research departments. This one is done by the MIT to use all the the forks of the trees, which are the strongest part of the tree, and to just model them and use them in parametric. So maybe these are also things that can be thought. And then, well, you talked about a lot about straw, and of course there is adding to wood. We are really concerned about that, bringing more natural materials. There was this study made for Europe showing that basically, when you look at all the materials, timber and straw are the two materials of the future on the size of the European continent. There's a little bit of hemp, but it would be better to keep it for clothing to replace cotton. That's the main point. And then there are a lot of other materials, like we're developing right now a sort of hemp lime system with residues of sugar cane in the Caribbean. It's a bit the same thing as using straw, using residues of agriculture. The thing is that we are in France, so it's super easy to make this block and prove it works. But then now we're going to have all the fire tests, blah blah blah. That's sometimes the problem with the regulation. And then there's also all the garbage, the things that are thrown away. And our venture Costo, we are taking all these art transport crates. There are tons of them. I mean, in France, they make 10,000 of them every year. And basically, once they come back, they are burned because it's a waste. And nobody wants to take them. We just take them, and with a machine, with people, you can transform them in furniture, in little things that come inside the building. Like this furniture that we did for a big food court outside of Paris. And then there is a big tradition of brick building in Ukraine. And there are also now super interesting, innovative ways of using soil. This is building made by friends, architect friends of, that we know just outside of Paris, and they make these prefabricated rammed earth blocks that are really made in a factory. So we come back to these sort of pop-up factories and that are piled in front of a wood structure. And I think they also put some straw insulation inside, but I'm not so sure. And then when you talk about sustainability, people are important. People are super important. We had a chance to make a competition in French Guiana, which is near Brazil. And they have a sort of paradox because they build social housing like this, which respects all the codes of France applied to this area. But people would prefer to live like this because in these new buildings, you are not providing them with things that fit to their culture, to the way of life. Just two examples. A lot of these people, they just go to the forest to hunt. When you bring a crocodile or a snake, a 3-meter snake, in a social housing apartment, it's pretty difficult to cook it, believe me. They have rituals. There's a sort of cleaning ritual that you have to do when you argue with your neighbors. So, and this is done in a small place like that. There's no place like to do that in social housing. And you could go on and go on and go on. And so you have 30% of social housing in this area where there is the highest rise of birth rate in the whole France that is empty just because people don't live there. They get sick. And so we developed this sort of proposal of this sort of system of a very easy way to build in wood where everything is standardized and can be built either by professional carpenters, by ordinary builders, or by the people themselves, and that can adapt to all the situations. Because of course, the objective was to lower completely the cost so that really, really poor people who are now living in slums could afford to pay the rent for these type of housings. Didn't. And well, that's what we also tried to do here in Ukraine with, you remember the teams you saw at the beginning. And it was so emotional last year in Bordeaux, the moment we spent with the 10 young Ukrainian architecture students. We had such strong bonds that we really made this vow. Next time we are doing something together is going to be in Ukraine. And we managed it, which is pretty extraordinary, really. The project we are working on is to design a new playground for children on Turkaniv Island in Kyiv. And the process we did, we managed to have just 2 weeks. So the first thing was to find children. And the city of Kyiv helped us. So it's also showing always this idea of implying the local communities and local stakeholders. And we brought them for 2 days on the island and in a space to okay, kids, how do you want to play here? What do you want to play? They made these incredible models and presented them. And then we had to work to see what we were going to do next. Those pictures didn't go. And so, well, we went a bit like kids. We continued working on their models, trying to understand what they had said to us, interpreting it, making models ourselves, and you're not seeing it too bad. And then finding a resource. So once again, thanks to connections, we find a sawmill that is not far from Kyiv, and we spend 2 days there just taking the trees that they have and cutting them to the dimensions that they can do and making the design with the dimensions that they do. And this was supposed to be the last one of the project, but I'm so sorry. And anyway, it finished yesterday. It was amazing. So we built we have all the things that the kids did, and a sort of small pavilion that is trying to interpret their ideas. Like when a kid tells you, and there were a lot of them saying, we want a river to fall in a river with a crocodile, or we want a swimming pool, or we want a cave of fear. Well, as an architect, I don't know what a cave of fear is, so we sort of tried to have a proposal for that. And yesterday, they were all coming to the site for a sort of little ceremony to practice the place. And then we're going to work all the year with them to get further and further until the final construction that would hopefully arrive next summer. Thank you.